All right, let's dive into a topic that so many of us think we understand, but we really don't. Menstrual exclusion in India. Now, you've probably heard it's all about impurity, right? Well, what if I told you the real story is something else entirely? Something far more powerful and, frankly, way more fascinating. Let's get into it.
So let's just start with the big question right up front. Why are menstruating women so often kept out of temples and sacred spaces? The answer we all know, the one we've been given our whole lives, that's just the tip of the iceberg. To get to the real truth, we've got to peel back the layers of history.
Because, and get ready for this, the original reason has almost nothing to do with being unclean or impure. That idea, that popular belief, is actually a huge historical misunderstanding. The truth is rooted in a worldview that is the absolute opposite of shame. And that brings us to our first major point. To find the real answer, we have to go way back to the earliest Dharmic traditions, and uncover a completely different way of seeing things. We're talking about menstruation as a sacred power, not an impurity. In these early traditions, you see this concept called Rtu Kala. It literally means the sacred time. This wasn't a time of being unclean. It was a revered, sacred period that marked a woman's fertility. It was seen as this profound moment when she was perfectly aligned with the rhythm of the entire cosmos, a time of incredible creative power. And this is because women were seen as living, breathing manifestations of Shakti, the dynamic, creative energy of the universe itself. So menstruation wasn't some biological hassle, no way. It was seen as a powerful, tangible, even explosive expression of that divine feminine force. I mean, look at this. This slide just lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, you have the modern myth, impurity and shame. And on the other, the original truth, sacred cosmic energy. So if it wasn't about being impure, why were there rules? Why the exclusion? And that is the perfect lead-in to our second section. The exclusion wasn't a moral taboo. It wasn't someone wagging their finger and judging a woman's body. It was based on a very specific set of ritual rules that came from a totally different understanding of energy. Okay, so think of it like this. Big Vedic rituals, they're like a really delicate, finely tuned electrical circuit. They require this state of strict energetic discipline called shaucha. Now, a menstruating woman is in a state of incredibly high energy. It's not bad energy, it's just a lot of it. It's like a power surge. And if you introduce a sudden power surge into a delicate circuit, you could blow the whole thing. See? It was about ritual incompatibility, not about a person being dirty. The tantric view adds another fascinating layer here. It suggests that deities that are consecrated in temples vibrate at a very specific frequency. A woman's powerful Shakti energy could either disrupt that frequency or, and this is just as important, her own energy could be overwhelmed by the temples. So the separation was also a kind of protection. Again, it's all about managing powerful intersecting energies, not about shame. Which brings us to the real mystery at the heart of all this. If the original understanding was so profound and respectful, how on earth did it get twisted into a taboo that's all about shame? Let's put on our detective hats and figure out how this happened. Right? This is the million-dollar question. How does a sacred power become a source of shame? Well, the answer isn't one single thing. It's a story about centuries of cultural shifts and political power plays that basically buried the original meaning under layers of new ideas. This quote really gets to the heart of the strategy. If you want to break a civilization, don't burn its books, hire its priests. Just think about that for a second. It suggests that the most effective way to change a culture is from the inside. You don't have to destroy its knowledge, you just have to distort its meaning through its own authorities. And you can see this process happening layer by layer over time. So you start with the original reverence for Shakti, then the first layer. Concepts of ritual impurity, or najaset, from Islamic legal frameworks start to influence local customs. Then comes the next layer, British colonial rule, bringing with it this intense Victorian prudery that saw menstruation as unhygienic and something to be ashamed of. And the final layer, the codification of Anglo-Hindu law, which basically cemented these new moral codes and erased the original nuanced meaning. And this wasn't just forced on people from the outside. The change was actually pushed from within. According to the sources, some local elites and priests, to protect their own status under foreign rulers, started enforcing these new ideas.
So those nuanced ritual guidelines about energy management, they were slowly turned into rigid black and white moral commandments about purity and sin.
So all these historical shifts, they didn't just stay in the history books. They created a deep and lasting legacy of shame, an internalized system of control that continues to affect millions of women today.
One of the key ways this shame spread was through a sociological process called Sanskritization. It sounds complicated, but the idea is pretty simple. To gain social status, different groups would start to adopt the practices of the so-called higher castes. And unfortunately, this often included adopting even stricter and more rigid menstrual taboos. The taboo itself became a weird kind of tool for social climbing, which helped bake the shame deep into the fabric of society.
And this really is the most profound and tragic result of it all. The source argues this is the ultimate colonial victory, when the people who've been colonized start to police themselves. When it's not an invader enforcing the rules anymore, but it's mothers, grandmothers, and community members enforcing the shame, making women feel bad about their own sacred natural rhythm. So, after all that complex and kind of heavy history, is there a path forward? Well, this final part of our explainer is all about that. It looks at how this lost understanding could actually be reclaimed. The path to getting it back involves a few key things. First, going back to the source, studying the original texts to really understand concepts like Shakti and Rtu Kala in their proper context. It means resurrecting traditions like Rajaswala Paricharya, which were practices where menstruating women were actually given rest and shown reverence, not isolated in shame. The goal here isn't to fight against tradition, but to rescue its true, empowering meaning from centuries of distortion.
And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. What does it actually mean to rescue a tradition from its own history? It's not just about celebrating the past. It's about confronting the complex, often painful layers of history that have buried the truth. It's like an act of cultural archaeology, digging for truth beneath all the dogma. And the real question is, once we've found that truth, what are we going to do with it?